So whenever we're jumping in and starting to figure out what we need to do to, have the idea, get the money, figure out, what the requirements could be, have a meeting of the minds, and pushing that into some sort of bringing it to life, essentially. What do we do in order for us to put ourselves in a position where we can actually manage the change? And configuration, right? So this is usually the process that we see. Usually the process that we see is for change control, change management, configuration management is super important. And usually what we'll see is there's some sort of change request that comes in that allows the change control board or configuration control board, the CCB, to go in and evaluate whether or not the code is working the way it needs to, and if not, how do we go through and actually make that change? And this comes in to that CMMI, like the functional practice or applying it. Level 5 would be a very robust change management. You can also have change management for security as well. And that comes into more of like control management. So if any of you guys are doing RMF and you're applying controls, you can actually, put the controls into a ticketing system like Jira or any of the other Support Magic or Zoho, any of the ones that are out there, Service First. And with the intent that, we request the control and it gives us a way that the users can say, hey, I'd like to have this feature, and submits the request. Once that request is input into that form, then leadership that the system owners of whatever system that this is, the data owners of the system, could then go and do some sort of cost benefit analysis on it, right? And so how much is it going to cost us? When I was at SAIC, I had a manager, and I think that he was mostly joking when he said it, but a lot of times it worked in that way. He always said, whenever we're estimating, you want to be truthful with how long it would take for you and your team to do it. But just know this, that anytime you give us an estimate, we're going to multiply it by pi. And so if I thought something would take 100 hours, they would multiply it by pi to make sure that we had a little bit of wiggle room in there, but also, I guess, account for some scope creep as well. The customer changing their mind and wanting something else. And because of that, that the idea can be prioritized. So if you're going in and doing an estimate and you think that it's going to take, 100 hours, then, another thing can actually go through in using the idea for the prioritization of them. If something's going to take 100 hours as opposed to, 50 hours, maybe we want to try to knock the 51 out first, or if something's going to take 5 hours, we can put that up at the top because we get a quick win. One of the questions here, what was the reasoning of using pi? Whenever you're trying to figure out like how much something is going to cost, usually, having done this for a little while, usually you come up with like a wrap rate, and that wrap rate is usually like 1.6, 1.7. What they would do is they would always try to highball the estimate to the customer, knowing that if you multiplied it by that specifically 3.14, then they would always be able to beat that estimate. And then, so for metrics are concerned, very rarely did we go over what was budgeted for that specific task. And because we would, the engineering team would get together and we'd be like, we think this is going to take us, 100 hours. What leadership would do is they'd turn around and say, well, we think it's going to take 314 hours. And so the engineering team would always come underneath that, even when we had issues with, going over budget. Hopefully that makes sense. And so each and every one of these, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why. Under promise, over deliver. Yeah, that I don't know why not 2 or 2.5. Because I mean, think about times in your career, Kyle, where you've absolutely pooped the bed with your estimate on different things. What we would do whenever we were developing these agency components is, since there were 16 centers all around the United States, you never knew what people would start to pepper in after we would give them an estimate for implementations on these agency-wide systems. And so people would come out the woodwork trying to get a little piece of the pie to implement that solution. So they would always just say, take whatever the estimate is and let's multiply it by pi and give it up to the customer. And the customer would always approve it. Yeah. You're right, Shmaria. That's what we try to do. You double it personally. I know a lot of construction contractors will double it. By doing that, in my head, I can count probably on one hand the times that we have not been able to deliver by doing an estimate. And sometimes, if it's a new client, just to be completely honest with you, and I think that I know where you're going here, Kyle. Just to be completely honest with you, sometimes we lose the work because we're 3 times what somebody who's looking to only make 5% on something. We don't want to estimate the actual hours that it's going to take and only make a little tiny bit of money. We'd rather tell them that it's going to take this long, win the project, and then if it doesn't take that long, either get more profit or tell them, hey, we didn't use this many hours. Is there anything else you want us to work on? And usually they'll have us work on other projects and maybe get some more funding. And then, we do it again for the next estimate, and then we do it again for the next estimate. And that's just a way that we can kind of keep that bucket full for estimations. And, in this particular case, whenever we're talking about requesting a change, the change gets into some sort of quality control. Once the quality control comes in, then we can start to develop it for that deployment. So we develop the solution, we figure out when it can be deployed. After we've documented it, which is a big deal. I had a mentor of mine early on in my career that said what separates the good engineer from the expert engineer is the level of documentation that they do. And whether or not you agree with that, I've been on some whack projects before where there's been absolutely no documentation. And then I've been on projects before where it's almost overwhelming, the amount of documentation. You know that somebody did their due diligence in that particular regard. And I'd rather have the latter of the two, where I'm inundated with documentation, as opposed to flying by the seat of the pants, figuring out which side is up after I'm in the ring of inception. So we get into this release management or release control, and this we have that as a step to put us in check to make sure that we've done all the necessary steps, like debugging code, running a vulnerability scan, maybe doing regression testing, those types of things, to put ourselves in a position where we've talked to leadership. We know that we've identified what the change is going to be, and we put it into configuration management. So we identified it, what it's going to be. We've looked at it in a way to understand that the change that we're implementing is authorized and made with the intent of what the customer said. We can formalize any type of records or documentation, making sure that we have the proper approval as well, which is, CCB board, change control board. In addition to that, the configuration audit is important. And so a couple of things just on the practitioner side of the house that we always do in enterprise environments is we typically, when we're doing the configuration management, we'll have there are two documents that we typically like to deliver. We have an as-built document, so it actually is the system as it was built, and then we also like to provide a file manifest. And so usually on any type of configuration management system or change control, those are two artifacts that we will typically deliver as before we will do the implementation. And we'll put those out for review with different clients to make sure that they have an idea of, hey, this is how we built it, step by step. So almost like a procedural document with, if it's on a Linux machine, we'll have, the commands that we used, to do certain things. And then, what files were changed, which files did we include, those kinds of things. One of, in that type of as-built document, one of the best ones that I like to look and is some of the examples here. Let me just show you. We use this all the time, which is DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean is something that we use for rapid prototyping. If you've not ever heard of DigitalOcean, you can go out and do some research. But the as-built document is almost like a tutorial that tells you step by step what you're going to do. So in this particular case, DigitalOcean is they've grown since the last 8 years that we've been using them. Their tutorials are spot on, and they keep them up to date. Anytime that we're building things, we usually will refer to the DigitalOcean tutorials. If it's on-prem, then we'll build it out in the cloud first, making sure that we understand all the bells and whistles that need to happen. This is specifically for a LAMP stack, installing Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. But you can see that they go through with great detail here how to set it up. And so a lot of times we'll either refer to this as a, for referential integrity and like a bibliography almost, but most of the time that as-built document will have, the command that we ran, and then here's the results. Command that we ran, here's the results. To the point where we screenshot, if there's menus, we'll put the menus in there. If there's, in a way that is methodical and at an expert level, because that's super important from one engineer to another. So we don't really know each other, but if we have a common body of knowledge that we practice, if I turn a project over to Shamaria and she is wanting to know all the documentation that I had, hopefully I would have it all organized and provide it over to her and then be available for any questions. Same thing if Kyle had a project, he wanted to give it to me, I would ask for the documentation. Maybe he would send me a SharePoint link or a Teams link that would house all the different artifacts, that would be appropriate. One of the things that we would do at NASA is we would actually put it into all of these different artifacts into what we call the resource artifact locator. And so that was a RAL, a resource artifact locator, which was almost like a table of contents where you would be able to have links in a folder to show you where everything was located out on SharePoint. And we still use SharePoint quite a bit. A lot of our customers still use SharePoint quite a bit, but we've transitioned over to using Microsoft Teams and building apps within Teams for sharing this type of information.